let's get into our first speaker. So he showed us a taste of what he can do yesterday. He brought in the Conscious Collective. It was fantastic. So Dr. Nishal Khusial, he's the Executive Director at Imperium Advisory Solutions. He's had a distinguished career as CEO, CTO, and IT leader in multiple corporates. Yes, you can come closer, including the big four auditing firms. Dr. Khusial holds a PhD in digital science, data, and technology. He has led cyber consulting and, wait for this, computer forensics initiatives on 4 continents. He's advised Fortune 500 boards on AI and BI, and he served as intern embassy general counsel for technology in Africa. Impressive. So what is he talking to us today? Doctor's talking to us about AI, the next FinTech frontier. Please give a big round of applause to Dr. Nishal.
Wow. Thank you so much for that intro. Well, I don't think I can top that, ladies and gents. So, good morning. As rightfully said by our elaborate MC, I see that we have the early birds. We'll probably have the night owls a little bit later coming in and filtering in. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nondescript entities, robotic entities, and otherwise, I'm really glad to have you guys around. I hope that you enjoyed yesterday's presentation, from the graveyard shift into the morning shift, eh? First and foremost, again, as our distinguished MC mentioned, we had an exercise of the collective consciousness of the audience. So let's jump into that first. Up on the screen that is visible right now, you will see a feed. And of course, all of you guys would be familiar with the whole Mentimeter landscape. You can either use the QR code or use your cellular phones to go to menti.com, and via menti.com, enter in that particular passcode. And when you do, I'm going to give it about a few more seconds to allow everyone else to either QR or code. The next screen does have the code up on the entitlement, so good people, don't stress. I'm going to move to the next screen. You'll see the code up right on top. This will allow all of you to enter in your preconceived notion on what is a word or a short phrase that comes to your mind when we talk about artificial intelligence within FinTech. There would be space, I believe, for 3 individualized responses. You're welcome to put in 1, 2, or 3. For the overachievers of you, no more than 3. Now, ladies and gents, this is interesting because the intention of this particular segue in the morning, before we jump into our presentation, is to gauge where we are at before we even get into the presentation around our notions of artificial intelligence and FinTech. It's wonderful to get a sense of what our collective consciousness would be about these 2 topics. So I can see that there's a very, very pivotal and a very dramatically big notion regarding automation. I see predictive, I see productivity, payments, and automate. Of course, ladies and gents, you are welcome to piggyback off these words in the sense of reinstate the same words. You're not compelled to come up with new words, no problem. The reason why words are different sizes is that is a ratio of how many people have actually specified that word. So you see, a lot of us have the anticipation of automation and predictive capability within the space of FinTech and within the space of artificial intelligence. Exceptional. I am going to allow the screen to remain for a few moments more. So the last of you, by all means, send in your responses. Okay, with 92 responses, just below 100 responses, I believe we're in a good place to gauge the perspective that is amongst us as an audience. I'm now going to take note. Automation, predictive capability, efficiency, automate, which actually reinforces automation, speed. I see hype. That's quite interesting. Very, very interesting. We can jump into that as well. The future, interesting. AI assistant, great. Soft application. All right. Efficiency gain, exceptional. Customer segmentation, a utilization of AI. Okay, ladies and gents, 95 responses. I think we have a good 95%, so I'm glad about that. Let's move on to the next presentation, taking into account where our collective consciousness is. Our title today, in this morning, is Artificial Intelligence in FinTech, the Next Frontier. Quite a romantic notion regarding the whole Star Wars themes and all of that, so I was even thinking about having the cascading text. But unfortunately, that was copyrighted. So moving into a quick view of our agenda, introduction and context, which I believe will be a few seconds due to our very esteemed MC, the watchwords which we've used. And this was an anticipation, a section where, just as you guys have contributed to the collective consciousness, so too did we postulate and we estimated what would this be about? What would the entire FinTech seminar be about? We also then segue into a watchword about AI. We'll go on two notions which I think you as an audience are going to enjoy. The whole human and technology marriage, and then after that, the whole technology to AI marriage. Seems like it's a three-way, but we're all woke in this audience. I think it's fine. Moving on from there into AI and FinTech, there's a few sections. We'll go through all of that because that is our primary intention regarding this presentation. A Q&A roundup, and then we'll end off. Great. Let's move on. So I'm not going to belabor the point. As I said, our great MC has done quite a job with respect to an introduction. I think the reason for the introduction also was to have an appreciation for the audience and also to talk to the effect of why do I have the audacity of standing up here and narrating a few concepts regarding AI and FinTech. And I hope that there will be some value created out of this narrative between us that we can all take forward. Of course, you guys are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you need any information regarding this presentation and or the presentation itself, feel free. I've got no problem sending it to you. Let's talk about the first part of our presentation, which is the watchwords with respect to our reality that we find ourselves in. As you see, ladies and gents, there's quite an interesting preconceived notion which is on the slide right now. And I must say I am pleasantly surprised. And it is actually quite great that some of our previous day touched on these concepts. It's actually amazing that there's such synchronicity in our thinking. We talked about interconnectivity, digital enablement. There is a notion on GRCLA, that's governance, risk control, legislation, and assurance. We'll move into that a little bit. The whole dynamic between the generational gaps, the millennial, Gen Z, Gen X. Who knows what comes after Gen Z, by the way? Anyone? Alpha. Yeah, that's it. Gen Alpha. It's quite interesting because Gen Alpha is becoming a real thing as time is going on. Evolution. Socio and economic overlay of the map of technological progress is on the bottom left. What does that mean? We're going to delve into that on the basis of human into tech and tech into AI. Super apps we talked about. I love the whole concept of the algorithm and how we can use it as leaders in the fintech industry to enable our commodities and to enable our intelligence. Interaction and the modality of engagement on artificial intelligence, increasing adhesion and stickiness. The third world in the first world context. Great. Let's move on to the next slide. And let's talk about AI. So AI in the notion of the watchwords or the concepts regarding AI that is pivoting around what we are discussing in this currently, artificial intelligence, there's a notion of augmented intelligence. Who in the audience understands the difference between artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence? Yeah, absolutely. There was a good catch-all analogy there, Neuralink. Neuralink being augmented intelligence, assuming that it would work, which I do believe it's on the right path of. But artificial intelligence is a simulation of neural networks in a virtual environment, whereas augmented intelligence supplements the biological entity. Generative AI? The difference between artificial intelligence and generative AI? We've all heard about this one. Anyone? And I am going to test. Yes.
Generative AI is just a subset of AI that basically is creative.
Great. All right, noted. Thank you for that. Multimodal omni AI. A whole lot of words just with AI, hey? What does that mean?
AI detects the spread of many formats and text to the input, right? Video, voice, files.
Multimodal AI is the new, I wouldn't say really new, ladies and gents, but is the concept of AI having the ability to digest information of a multimodal nature, multidimensional. Correct, absolutely. Audio, video, etc., etc. It's going to be quite interesting because the concept connected to Neuralink also has to do with ECG, neurological movement, which is then mapped to specific actions which are created in the virtual landscape. But we won't get into that right now. Machine learning, good macro concepts. The supportive micro to the macro concepts, hallucination and logic drift. I mean, AI is suffering from that quite a bit, and it is about, it's actually quite interesting, ladies and gents, because we heard a notion of entropy, and that's logic entropy in yesterday's discussions between the audience and the presenters. And drift and hallucinations is directly and inversely proportional to the usage of those concepts. The entropy. The higher the entropy, the more the chances you will have hallucination and drift. So it's directly proportional. So it's inversely proportional to the quality of the output. What am I saying? The more we use AI, the more clever it becomes. We have less chance of hallucination. Is that a fair statement, ladies and gents? Why is it not a fair statement? Let's consider who's feeding in information into the artificial intelligence. There is a point of failure, the point of failure being the input, the biasness of the input, potentially, that could create perhaps not what we would consider hallucinations, but an automatic bias to the output of the AI. You can then qualify to say it's an hallucination or not, but the reality is the input. No matter how much of information is fed from a biased input, you will have a biased output. So there's a consideration there regarding input, process, and output. CCM is basically an acronym for Continuous Controls Monitoring, which is a nice utilization of the artificial intelligence regime set, where you basically continually automate testing of certain logic on a transactional base to look for anomalies and detect issues. Continuous controls monitoring. It helps auditors quite a bit. and will help auditors quite a bit. And there's even a notion that I've heard within the auditing fraternity, my colleagues, that it will replace auditors. That's quite interesting, hey? Everyone's talking about AI replacing jobs. Everyone. There was an analogy yesterday which spoke to a horse and cart. And I was going to just throw out to the audience that I didn't this morning need to actually get a tune-up for my horse. But in reality, that was our previous reality. What happened from there to now? There's a concept of human evolution, which initiated and allowed us to evolve as a species. So we adapted and we evolved, given our corralling and surrounding circumstances, and we overcame the notion of the fact that, oh no, I actually shoe horses, so now my job is redundant. Sure, it would be redundant, but there's repurposing and otherwise which can happen. I'm not going to go into that because that is most certainly another summit, topic for another summit discussion. Algorithmic intelligence and entropic behavioral effect and cascade. I think we did touch on that. Entropy has to do with the actual quality of the output. It is directly proportional to how much you would train an algorithm, an LLM, and or otherwise. The more you train it, the more quality the output will generate. Hyperpersonalization and digi-interaction. That is a watchword within the enablement of artificial intelligence. Because of the processing speed of artificial intelligence, hyperpersonalization becomes more of a reality. Hyperpersonalization speaks to quite a cadre of elements. The transactional analysis of our spending patterns, what do we do as individuals and our preferences, what do we do as individuals and our biases, what do we like and don't like. Now, for AI to digest that and come up with an output to personalize our experience, even down to the minute detail of emotive feeling, that is an intention and that is a pathway, roadmap for AI and its evolution. Lastly, but not least, is the modality of learning and engagement. So there is a notion, ladies and gents, of edutech. And edutech is quite an interesting space. We have seen some amazing developments, including entirely virtualized three-dimensional environments where people can now walk in and simulate an educational concept. Intriguing. Now comes the interesting part. Up on the screen, ladies and gents, you will see the generational gap. Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. Any Gen Alphas in the audience? Right. Any Gen Zs? Great. I'm actually doing a statistical analysis on the generational demographic right now. And millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers, I would assume, is the remaining of all of us. Why did I put this up on the screen? Well, let's talk about the technological propensity and what has evolved. Here's 1990. And here's 2020s, which is, for some of us, some time ago, but not so far off. In the 1990s, it didn't take much to satisfy our emotive desires, our need for play, let's say our satisfaction variable. Nowadays, we are experiencing that even with quite a lot of tools at our disposal, to satisfy us, so far as the satisfaction variable is concerned, we find ourselves more and more craving for stimulation. And that could be, if you look up at the screen, ladies and gents, there's a thought provocation that I've placed up. And some of my slides do have those thought provocations for you as an audience. Technology is an integral catalyst of the human progression and indirectly affects humanity's evolutionary propensities. That's quite a statement. But basically what it means is that in the journey of how technology has evolved, in its ability to stimulate more and more, so too has humanity's propensities also evolved in the same direction. We want more and more stimulation. We want more dopamine. We want to be satisfied more and more. We crave more pictures. We crave more interaction. And that is directly proportional to what has happened with technology and its enablement of all of these for us. It's interesting, eh? So the human evolutionary path is being influenced by technology. So let's talk about then what's happening to technology itself. Technology has literally skipped leaps and bounds. There is a representation on the screen. It is quite small, but the intention of the representation was to show you the curvature of the graphs, the spikages, which basically speaks to the accelerated growth of technological development and deployment over the years. We are not talking about a gentle segue in the sense of a logarithmic graph. We're talking exponential growth. And it's only getting more aggressive because of artificial intelligence. Interesting. So, we understood technology. We understand the connection between humanity and technology. Let's look at AI and technology. On the screen, you will see something that might question a lot of your belief systems around when AI had its first venture. 1950, the notion of AI. Birth. How many of us knew that in 1950 we were talking about and conceiving notions of artificial intelligence? I see. Great. So, the path that you see on the screen also has a thought provocation. And that provocation is that the current fruits of the artificial intelligence journey have been planned and promulgated for the past 70 years. It's been in an intention. It's been humanity's progressive path. But let me ask the audience, you esteemed members, this. Why suddenly the interest? Why suddenly the sensationalism over and above what we've experienced in the past? Why? Anyone has an interesting answer? Yes?
The technology has finally caught up to the idea.
Excellent. The technology has caught up to the ideology. Great. Yes?
So, it took us almost 20 years to start to regulate or understand that we needed to regulate social media. And I think that the awareness that came with the fact that we needed to regulate the risks around social media has made us a lot more aware, or hopefully a lot more conscious of what we need to do when it comes to AI.
Brilliant. Regulation, awareness of artificial intelligence proportional to what we've seen with other commodities. Yes?
The barriers to interacting with AI have been reduced to LLMs.
Great. The barriers have been reduced. Yes, my dear. More data has been generated. Exceptional. All of the answers are correct. Let me consider supplementing all of the answers. The processing power of our architecture and our infrastructure has exponentially also increased. Our ability to digest data has also increased. The need for the regulation on the basis of the digestion and the new dynamics, that would have increased. So, interesting that right now we're sitting at a precipice, literally a frontier, that who knows what's going to happen. We can only assume about the future, but I can honestly say that this is a juncture in humanity's evolution. We already are talking about biomechanical engineering, biotechnology engineering, etc., etc. Essentially, we're at a precipice where the technology, the processing speed, the power, our infrastructure, our storage capability has evolved to a point where everything has synchronized for us to appreciate and leverage artificial intelligence. At least the birth of it, the true birth of it. Quite stimulating and concerning at the same time, ladies and gents. So what can we use artificial intelligence for? We took a snapshot. And in the snapshot, we considered that in the 2020s, you might have seen the previous demographic, it was 2010. So 2020s, here's a demographic of 2020. Artificial intelligence and machine learning conceptualization, polysectorial cascade, which basically means that for this point in time, this is where we see artificial intelligence being utilized in multi-dimensional sectors. healthcare, finance, retail, transportation, etc., etc. The provocation is an interesting one, and take note, good people. Technology is a catalyst for humanity, as it is that artificial intelligence is a catalyst for technology, which means that artificial intelligence is an indirect catalyst for humanity. Let's now take all of this. We've understood the background of artificial intelligence. We've tinkered with a few watchwords. We've conceptualized that, okay, it is in various industries. Let's move it towards our FinTech value proposition. Let's talk about what exactly within artificial intelligence can we leverage within the FinTech environment. So here you have a multimodal Venn diagram, if that's a thing. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. Who knows what RPA is? Robotic process automation. NLP. Some of you are saying neuro-linguistic programming, which I can appreciate, but not quite in this context. Yes, natural, not national. Great. Multimodal artificial intelligence, which is exactly what we mentioned about its ability to digest different dimensional information. So here's a lot so far as what's within the macro view of artificial intelligence. Let's segment this into 3 influences that we can utilize within our FinTech context. AI and machine learning, LLMs as part of NLPs, and RPAs. And let's look at the thought provocation here. Before the thought provocation, take note of what's on the screen, ladies and gents. Coupling AI and machine learning allows systems to learn and improve over time. Machine learning. And that's more self-incubated machine learning as well, in addition to circumstantial machine learning about the data. Natural language processing, enabling machines to understand and respond to human language. There was a wonderful notion yesterday about the dynamics of linguistic digestion. I love that. And that is something that makes us humans, our multifaceted ability to interact with each other. I found a very interesting article that even spoke to the notion that the way in which different languages are spoken and grammatically represented directly influence and are proportional to even our visual senses. There was a notion that somewhere within ancient Greek, because there wasn't a specific notion of the distinguishing between blue and between its sister color turquoise, and otherwise everything was one color. And apparently the synaptic visual conception of the color was also influenced. Interesting. But let's look at this, and let me throw out the thought provocation to all of you good robotics. Where do AI chatbots reside in these 3? Hands up? Yes. It would. You're right. And I think you're right on the basis that that is where it is housed, so far as its ability to interact with. It sits in all. And I think that's why you guys were so pensive. But it does sit with all, good people. Absolutely in the LLM as well, because you need a repository which you need to reference. In fact, the ultimate intention is a super advanced LLM. It's basically equivalent of human memory repository. Let's move on. So now we've understood a little bit about the influencing variables. Let's talk about the applications. There are a lot of applications. And I must say, without being specifically pointed, I have taken some first world applications. We are in a third world context, as we mentioned yesterday, ladies and gents, and AI personas. But for this particular discussion, let's look at where we can go. Machine learning algorithms for fraud detection. Interesting. Chatbots, in the sense of human-to-machine interaction. Heck, for that matter, how many of you have seen machine-to-machine interactions where two AI personas were talking to each other and what happened with the conversation? That was intriguing, hey? But yeah, that was obviously an initial stab at it. There wasn't very good output. So coming back to our particular discussion, in addition to chatbots, we have risk mitigation and management. That's more the continuous controls monitoring discussion we had a little bit earlier. AI enables personalization in financial services, and based on individual customer profiles that are generated, we can actually take a view about where this individual is going. Where has this individual come from, and what is this individual's current state collectively with the data of that individual? These are nice concepts, but I wanted to move into. Let's talk about a catch-all notion of what is the right usage of AI and FinTech. So when done right, I invite all of you to consider this. AI provides exponential efficiency, optimization, effectiveness, the ability of impact, and efficacy, getting it done, surpassing human limits in the analysis and interrogation of vast amounts of data, given quantified logical paths to the intelligence generation, the direction of the output, given to the machine by us, and eventually by the machine to the machine. But for now, let us just enjoy the fact that we have something to say in it. Providing expansive analytical insights, refined by the application of influencer variables, direct and indirect variables. So we talk about when we use AI, we can reference the base of the output of AI with other influencing variables in order to refine our output. Recall, ladies and gents, that there was an interesting soundboarding yesterday about the diagrammatic representation of the rituals within a certain region, and how the rituals within a certain region, I do believe it was an African region, West Africa, thank you. So the rituals within the West African region, the traditional rituals, actually influence the spending patterns and the risk profiling of individuals. It seems like that was an influencer variable within an actual persona demographic. Artificial intelligence has the ability to triangulate those vast amounts of information in rapid time, even to the point of making it quasi-real time. But that's when it's used in the right way. Let me throw out this thought provocation and highlight it. What you see on the screen now, ladies and gents, is one of the most interesting segues from what we are discussing into cybersecurity. Why are we talking about cybersecurity when this is an AI and FinTech forum? Yes. Brilliant. To the detriment of FinTech, of course, and to possibly the positive of FinTech, of course. On the screen are some concepts, known concepts of cybersecurity attacks that we've digested and we've seen, and there's some advanced concepts that some of you might have seen. Let me ask, what is the most common amongst the audience? Who has not experienced or had someone, friend or family, experience a phishing attack? Not experience. Okay, so all of you are fishermen and fisherwomen. Great. Social engineering directly related to a type of phishing attack. Malware could also be part of the phishing attack. So we are just segmenting it into the individualized investigative components here. The advanced side, I'm not going to highlight all of it, but I am going to highlight one. The last one is called polymorphic viruses. Polymorphic viruses are the most interesting type of malware and or anti-forensics mechanisms that we've seen, where a virus using AI rewrites its code. It morphs. It maintains its functionality, but it morphs. Hence, and thereby, defeating detection mechanisms. So that's quite interesting. Of course, polymorphic viruses did exist before AI, but AI has exponentially created something of a monster. We will see more and more of this, unfortunately, which is why we are being more preemptive and proactive. Anyway, this is, wait, before I move on to the answer, the thought provocation, ladies and gents, which of these that you see on the screen do not get worse? Note, which of these on the screen do not get worse with the usage and advent of artificial intelligence? So which of them are unaffected? And of course, what we are trying to achieve here is that all of this does influence our FinTech environment. But which of these are we safe from, even with AI being utilized? Let me move on to the next screen for the answer. As you see on the screen, ladies and gentlemen, there's the answer. Moving on from the answer, let's talk about digital citizenship. Now, I'm not going to go into an entire narrative about digital citizenship, but I am going to highlight one core element of it. With the advent and the usage of artificial intelligence, so too is the proportional need for us to be more socially aware, more risk aware, more ethically aware, digital ethically aware. You would see there's 3 individual circles on the screen right now. AI capabilities overlaid with ethical considerations and concepts, overlaid with regulation measures. I've highlighted this because this is something that we as leaders within the FinTech space need to take cognizance of. We're talking about a FinTech nirvana, a FinTech ideal state using artificial intelligence. And yet, we are not going to reach that without considering what is important within this space. This is important within this space. I'm going to move on to the next slide because I'm cognitive of the time, ladies and gents, and we're almost towards the end. To dilute down the previous slide into something that's a consideration, there are a few pillars that should be taken into account by all of you as professionals, and here are some of these pillars. We're not going to go into this, but this is a soundboarding of a consideration of ethics, which basically talks to the last element with respect to AI and FinTech. So what are we going to experience? What can we expect? On the screen right now, you see a few concepts, and those few concepts talk to the future. Explainable AI, which is basically artificial intelligence, which has the ability to incubate its own explanations and provide that to a user. Artificially intelligence-driven insights, self-incubated, self-triggered artificial intelligence, no human intervention at all. Quantum FinTech, that's interesting. Processing power exponentially increased with quantum computing, also will affect FinTech. Who does not know about what quantum computing is? Right. So in a nutshell, quantum computing is another mechanism which we are exploring in order to increment our processing capability, our processing power within the computing space. It speaks to a very, very technical quantum theory concept, which has nothing to do with binary zeros and ones, but every qubit in between a 0 and 1. If you are interested, we can get into an entire lecture about that for the next 5 days. But for now, let's encapsulate that it's a new mechanism. Edge AI, this is interesting. Artificial intelligence which stays resident within the edge, within the device, and not within the server. Processing all of the information and feeding digested, synchronized small packets to the server to make artificial intelligence even more efficient. IoT on steroids. Federated learning, this is quite good. Can you imagine us taking the West Africa example, which we had yesterday, and cross-pollinating it with all of the global regions which experience a similar sort of traditional/risk profiling? So that's federated learning of AI. Some people would argue that's what's happening on ChatGPT right now, the federated learning. And then perfectly autonomous finances. Yeah, finally, your accountant can be a ghost in the machine as opposed to an individual. Good people, I think that brings us to a very, very brief exploration of some crazy concepts. And I must say it is very exciting. It's intimidating, but it is exciting. With respect to any Q's and A's, I don't think we have too much of time. We have 5 minutes. Great. So I'd like to ask for some questions from the audience. I'm actually quite glad that everyone seems to be absolutely at liberty with some of the false information that I presented. Okay, ladies and gents, I think that as an encapsulation, if there is any thoughts that you might have, you're welcome to reach out to me directly. We can have a dialogue. Let us then thematically round up and get to the end. What you see on the screen is basically a summary of the journey of discussion that we've embarked on this morning. I'm not going to narrate for you, but I am going to invite you to consider. Some of these concepts will already resonate with each of you. Some of these concepts might be new. But there is a takeaway here. A takeaway in the sense of where are we going as a species and where are we going as a technological using species in particular. It's quite interesting. These concepts are actually resounding in the entire FinTech summit itself. You have individualized concepts here which would be spoken about and proffered in other discussions. So, ladies and gents, here is our roundup. Moving from the roundup into, finally, the last sentimentality: adapt, and evolve. And this has been but a glimpse. But it's a glimpse with the intention to stimulate your thought processes as leaders within the industry. I hope that you can take this away, digest it, and at least catalyze some moves into a brighter and a really exciting future, business-wise and personal-wise. Thank you, ladies and gents.